From Music Row in Nashville, Tennessee, this is Hope for the Caregiver, the nation's #1 show for the family caregiver. I am Peter Rosenberger, bringing you more than 30 years of experience to help you stay strong and healthy as you take care of someone who is not. More than 65 million Americans right now are doing this. How do you help those people? How do you help the ones who are helping? What does it look like? What's the vocabulary? How do you know if you've been successful at doing it? That's what this show is all about. And if you want to be on the show, the number to call is 877-655-6755. 877, write this down, 877-655-6755. If you want to follow along on video, Facebook Live, you can just go to Facebook and then go to Hope for the Caregiver. And we're there as well. And our Twitter feed is also Hope for Caregiver. And that's the number 4. Hope for Caregiver. And we're thrilled to have you along. 877-655-6755. Got a fabulous show for you, and I hope you'll join us on it for the entire show because you don't want to miss a special guest I have at the bottom of the hour. Speaking of special guest, he's no guest, but we love him. We love him dearly. He is the show's producer, the man behind the glass that keeps this thing on the rails. You know him as the Baron of the Board, the Sultan of Sound, the Earl of Engineering. He is the man who put the word care into Carry On My Wayward Son. He is John Butler, the Count of Mighty Disco.
Carry on my wayward son.
Why are you doing this to me, man? You'd had me cue it up and said, hey, let's figure this and just have it ready. I mean, well, we all get a weary head every now and then.
We do indeed. I love that song, by the way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Who doesn't like that
I was
song?
getting ready to have my theme and everything. You had to make me switch, like, just right off the bat.
Your theme. I love the fact that you have a theme.
I know, right? This is fantastic. And if there was ever someone to steal a theme from, Merv Griffith. I mean, come on.
You know. In your illustrious career,
infamous? I'm sorry.
Illustrious. as a spectacular show host, have you ever had a theme before this one?
I have not.
A host. You've produced 100 shows over your career.
100, and not like 100 individual broadcasts. I'm talking, I've done lots of shows. I don't think I've ever had one. And I've been on the air for a couple of them in not necessarily this capacity, but still, hey, chat back. What's the producer up to sort of thing, you know.
Nothing like that, because you've become endeared from coast to coast on this show.
Internationally,
yes,
absolutely.
You have. Hey, look, I got it. I will deviate a little bit. Not that we're deviants, but I am going to deviate.
Well,
and Nielsen came out. You know, the ratings giant, whatever they do. Nielsen, you've all heard of the Nielsen ratings. Well, guess what? This is a quote: "Old school AM/FM radio, the most popular media of all."
Interesting.
Still today in the United States of America, according to Nielsen, and these are the people that that rate television programs and all this stuff.
Yeah.
With 243 million monthly listeners, radio bests the competition across the board. Each week, they said, more Americans tune to AM/FM radio than any other platform. What's more, according to Nielsen, 93% of U.S. adults 18 and older listen to radio every week, more than those watching television or using a smartphone, TV-connected device, tablet, or PC. TV reaches 88% of Americans and garners 229 million viewers, but 243 are listening to radio.
Well, right on. Now,
Brad Kelly, he's the managing director of Nielsen Audio. He said, technology trends are a bit like fashion trends. They come and go, oftentimes long forgotten after the craze ends. But there's one notable exception to the technology fashion trend rule in the media world: broadcast radio. AM/FM radio is the blue blazer of the media universe.
Oh, nice.
Who would have believed 100 years after its debut, AM/FM radio would continue to top the charts as the medium that reaches more consumers each week than any other?
Well, thank you, Nikola Tesla. All right.
So why am I bringing that up? Because people have asked me, why are you doing a show for caregivers on the radio? Why don't you do a podcast or this or that or whatever? And we do all of those.
Yeah, those are still available. These are not mutually exclusive things.
I push all of this, but it all starts right here on the radio. And one of the things they spend a lot of time talking about is the power of radio versus television, where everything that a lot of times people put television on and let it just drone on in the background.
Mm-hmm.
But with radio, particularly if it's compelling content, you're building a relationship. Listener to host, call-ins, and so forth. There's a community that is created.
Well, one thing that I like about there's a phrase that they use on NPR a lot, and that is the driveway moment.
The driveway moment.
I love the driveway moment where I'm not getting out of the car.
I can't get out of the car. I've had those moments.
Yeah.
And what we've tried to do with this show is to create that type of environment for the family caregiver. And I have people I know that get into their car and drive around for the entire duration of this show because that's their time.
Sunday drivers.
Listening to Sunday drivers that are listening to this show.
This is true. I mean that in the highest possible respect.
Well, they're listening to it for that reason because this is their time to be part of a community. It's not just background noise. They're part of a relationship that we have now as fellow caregivers, and that's the point of what we're trying to do here with caregivers, because one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issues for caregivers as a group, as a demographic, is isolation. And what this said was in the study that Nielsen came out with, this is the most powerful medium of all. That's smartphones, podcasts, Twitter, everything to listeners across this country.
There you go.
And I thought, how cool. Now, we do all the other. I have the Caregiver Podcast. You can go out to caregiverpodcast.com. Okay? You could get our podcast and do it that way and get this show content, because I will take this show and put it out that way. We have a YouTube channel, Hope for the Caregiver. It's our YouTube channel. And all of the above we have, but it all starts right here with you and I having dialogue and conversation, opening up to phone calls and so forth to come on the show and just share what's on your heart. And we respond to this. We share things that are meaningful to you as a caregiver, and that's our commitment to you. That's our privilege to do this. I love doing this. I truly love it. So it was kind of nice to see Nielsen really validate the power of this medium. Oh,
well, it's not only is it Nielsen validating it, it's the math validates it.
And you like math. It's all about the math. Hey, speaking of which, on validation, I had a wonderful time with a group of people who just I've become incredibly endeared to, and they've just embraced everything we're doing on the show. And I was up at Rhode Island this week. And I don't know if they like to have me come up there because of my accent, which I don't hear. I don't hear my accent, but evidently they think I have one. And so, no, this is the Rhode Island Parent Information Network.
Okay.
And they deal particularly with parents of special needs children. And what a great group. And I want them to know how much I appreciated them letting me come up and spend some time with them. And I got an interesting question, and I thought I would take that as my caregiver tip of the day for today. So, we do a weekly, we do a caregiver tip of the day.
You're messing with my theme, I'm messing with yours, man. All right?
You're messing with my head. Our caregiver tip of the day is sponsored by AARP of Tennessee, and that's aarp.org/TN for Tennessee. And they have been with this show from really the beginning, and I'm very grateful for them. They have a huge smorgasbord of things to help a family caregiver. And this is one, this lady asked me, said, how do you function, how do you try to help yourself function in the relationship with the person you're doing so that you're not always the caregiver, but you can be the husband or the spouse or the whatever. And basically, how do you be husband versus caregiver all the time?
Yeah.
And that's been a real trick. And Gracie will tell you that there are times when she has to say, no, you're being a caregiver. I need you to be a husband. And I get that, because just making meals and doing all the tasks we do as caregivers make us somehow think that we're really participating in the relationship. We're not. And here's an easy way to remember that. For me, this is how I do it for me. See the heart, not the chart. See the heart, not the chart. It's so easy for us to be locked in to seeing all the medical needs and all the variety, the inventory of needs that our loved one has. But we need to see the heart too. And if we can just remind ourselves periodically of those things, it's going to increase the value and the quality of the relationship we have, whether it's our spouse, whether it's a child, whether it's an aging parent. And you have a special needs child. My brother has a special needs daughter. She's 30 years old. She is basically the equivalent of about a 18-month-old. She's completely wheelchair bound. But guess what? She has a heart. She has a personality. And it's okay to enjoy that personality aside from all the medical needs that she has. And it's not just taking care of this object. You're taking care of a person who has real heart needs, even if they are dealing with special needs issues, even if they are dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever. They are struggling in their own way, and they need all the things that you and I need: love, acceptance, physical touch, kindness, gentleness, engagement. And they need those things as well. And if we deny them those things, all it does is create more angst in the relationship, and it ultimately will harm both of us. And this is a hard lesson. It's a hard place to keep this in mind, because the needs of the body sometimes drown out the cry of the heart. And so it's very important for us to listen with both ears. And that takes a little bit of skill, a little bit of practice. Now, it doesn't mean that it's a burden for us to do it. It just means it's a muscle we need to work as caregivers. Why? Because we're just giving so much, and it's all up to us? No, because we become better people in listening to the heart cry of those around us. We do. We really do. It increases our capacity to love. It's like an auger drilling down into our heart that opens up our ability to love better, to love freer, to love more of an engaged way. And then in the process, again, you've heard me say this over and over and over in this show. The goal is not to feel better, because we're not going to feel better about a lot of the things we have to do. The goal is to be better, to be better. And part of learning to be better is to love, to extend that, not just by making a meal or doing the task of caregiving, but by seeing the heart, not the chart. Hey, this is Hope for the Caregiver. This is the nation's #1 show for family caregivers. I'm Peter Rosenberger. We'll be right back.
Some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or if you signed up for a plan you're not happy with, you still have a choice. MediShare is a healthcare sharing program. Hundreds of thousands of Christians are part of this. It can save you a lot. Typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. You can join MediShare anytime. It's easy to call and look into it. There's no pressure at all. And man, what a difference it can make. 855-25-SHARE. That's 855-25-SHARE.
Have you ever struggled to trust God when lousy things happen to you? I'm Gracie Rosenberger, and in 1983, I experienced a horrific car accident leading to 80 surgeries and both legs amputated. I questioned why God allowed something so brutal to happen to me. But over time, my questions changed, and I discovered courage to trust God. That understanding, along with an appreciation for quality prosthetic limbs, led me to establish Standing with Hope. For more than a dozen years, we've been working with the government of Ghana and West Africa, equipping and training local workers to build and maintain quality prosthetic limbs for their own people. On a regular basis, we purchase and ship equipment and supplies. And with the help of inmates in a Tennessee prison, we also recycle parts from donated limbs. All of this is to point others to Christ, the source of my hope and strength. Please visit standingwithhope.com to learn more and participate in lifting others up. That's standingwithhope.com. I'm Gracie, and I am Standing with Hope.
You know, it is all right. Thank you for that count of mighty disco. Welcome back to the show, For Caregivers, About Caregivers, hosted by a caregiver. I am Peter Rosenberger, bringing you 3 decades of experience to help you stay strong and healthy as you take care of someone who is not. If you want to be on the show, 877-655-6755. Coming up after the bottom of the hour, we're going to have the founder and executive director of a wonderful organization. Some of you may know about this already. It's called Stephen Ministers. And wait till if you don't know what it is, you're in for a treat. If you do know what it is, you're in for a treat. So you can't lose. You really can't lose. John.
Yes.
You know,
you rag.
As thank you, Lurch.
He's actually just a little bit taller than I am. Just by not much.
And a whole lot creepier.
Oh yeah. Yes.
By the way, he was on an episode of Star Trek, the original series.
Yes, he was.
Sorry, y'all. We go up. John and I just kind of go off.
Well, he was. No. That was somebody. Who was the guy that was Luxana Troy's?
No,
butler. That was somebody else.
That was Next Generation. He played Lurch in the movies.
Yes.
The Lurch who played in the TV show of the Addams Family was on the original series.
Gotcha. Okay. Now that we've cleared that up.
Now look, look at that. That is bonus. See, here's what this deal is. Here's the deal about this show. If you give me 4 weeks, trust me with your heartache and your challenges as a caregiver. If you just trust me with your weariness and your heartache as a caregiver for just a month's worth of shows, I promise you, we will equip you to be stronger and healthier and even a bit more joyful. If not, I'll give you your heartache and misery back.
Yep. There you go.
No charge. Absolutely no charge. I'll give it back.
And I'm assuming that on top of all of the things that we provide officially, you're going to be a better trivia participant.
You will win trivia test all over.
Oh, yeah.
All those little things that come up on Facebook, those little trivia things they do that hook you into giving your email out. By the way, don't do that. So I had this conversation with Gracie. She'll probably call in here in a minute when I say this. But she said, but they asked so nice. They asked so nice.
This is
they
true.
really wanted to know. And I'm like, I'm sure they did. but don't give that out. But yes, John and I will descend into trivia madness periodically. Hey, Mother's Day is coming up.
So it is.
And as is our custom here at this part of the show, we do what I like to call today's senior moment. Today's senior moment. How many of you all have a senior moment? Sometimes it's yourself and sometimes it's taking care of someone you love. But in Mother's Day, we get together and we see as a family or as individuals with our parents sometimes that they are not doing so well. Mom's not doing so well. And the tendency is to kind of panic on that. So today's senior moment, brought to you by Morning Point Senior Living and Memory Care, is, are you ready for this? Don't panic. Don't move quickly. Don't move quickly. I think the tendency is, oh my goodness, we've got to get Mom into a home right now. And it's lunch. It's just Mother's Day. Just enjoy Mother's Day. Maybe make some notes. Unless somebody's in imminent danger, don't move quickly.
Well, we've talked about this a couple of times. The Thanksgiving table is not the time to talk about this sort of thing.
It is not. It's a dinner. It's not intervention. Okay? And a lot of times, if you move too quickly, and I saw a thing on this the other day where they're calling us helicopter children.
Ooh.
We've heard the term of helicopter parents because that's the ones who go to all the soccer games and they just hover or whatever in school and they can't get out of the way and let the student just grow. But we are becoming helicopter children, taking care of our aging parents. And we get in there and just start making all kinds of decisions for them and just rob them of everything really quick. And I don't think we understand just how traumatic that is for them. They know they're getting old. I don't think anybody ages, unaware unless they're mentally incapacitated. But that doesn't mean you have to come in there and just start taking the keys and doing this and taking the checkbook and all that kind of stuff. Slow down. You didn't get here overnight. You're not going to get out of it or through it overnight. So the easiest thing for all parties is to just take a moment, just, maybe make some notes. Take some inventory time to say, okay, here's checklist we need to look at. But if you pull somebody out of their home and if you disrupt the routine of their life, you risk complicating this thing even more. They become very disoriented if they just go to some place. A lot of times, I've heard this so many times from so many experts with dementia care patients particularly. If you take them out of their existing home, the dementia will be exacerbated by putting them in a new environment, and they will become very, very disoriented. That's why, a lot of folks that will do this will take pictures of their existing home and try to recreate that as much as possible wherever they end up relocating and moving to.
I have another suggestion for that.
What's that?
Check their albums, their record albums, their music,
all these things to
take a picture of that.
Help them keep everything kind of in a what is it? Is it homeostasis?
Yeah, that is correct. I was going to say equilibrium is homeostasis, but just consistency is what
that you don't
for.
Want to disrupt. And the folks at Morning Point Senior Living and Memory Care Center, they will help you with this. They if you want to go out there and get some information, go out to morningpoint.com, and that's point with an E. Ask questions. You cannot ask too many questions in this situation. You don't have to come up with all the answers. Let's go to people who do this all the time. This may be your first time dealing with this, but it's not theirs. It's not the expert's first time dealing with it. So ask questions. Don't be in a hurry to just overreact. Okay? Please don't do that. So take a moment. Never doubt the power of inactivity. Hey, this is Peter Rosenberger. This is Hope for the Caregiver. We'll be right back.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or if you signed up for a plan you're not happy with, you still have a choice. MediShare is a healthcare sharing program. Hundreds of thousands of Christians are part of this. It can save you a lot. Typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. You can join MediShare anytime. It's easy to call and look into it. There's no pressure at all. And man, what a difference it can make. 855-25-SHARE. That's 855-25-SHARE.
Have you ever struggled to trust God when lousy things happen to you? I'm Gracie Rosenberger, and in 1983, I experienced a horrific car accident leading to 80 surgeries and both legs amputated. I questioned why God allowed something so brutal to happen to me, but over time, my questions changed, and I discovered courage to trust God. That understanding, along with an appreciation for quality prosthetic limbs, led me to establish Standing with Hope. For more than a dozen years, we've been working with the government of Ghana and West Africa, equipping and training local workers to build and maintain quality prosthetic limbs for their own people. On a regular basis, we purchase and ship equipment and supplies, and with the help of inmates in a Tennessee prison, we also recycle parts from donated limbs. All of this is to point others to Christ, the source of my hope and strength. Please visit standingwithhope.com to learn more and participate in lifting others up. That's standingwithhope.com. I'm Gracie, and I am Standing with Hope.
Welcome back to the show for Caregivers, about caregivers, hosted by a caregiver. I am Peter Rosenberger. This is Hope for the Caregiver, and we're so glad that you're with us. 877-655-6755. John, some years ago when Gracie took a really dark turn physically, it's been about 8, 9, 10 years ago. We really didn't know if she was going to make it. And several times it was pretty rough. And our pastor came to us and said, I've got a lady that I would very much like to connect with Gracie as part of our Stephen Ministry program. And this woman came over to just sit with Gracie, just sit with her, just hang out, just listen to her, just love on her, just care for her. And they have become like super dear friends. And I was so moved by the whole concept of Stephen Ministry. And I want, for those who don't know what it is, I'm getting ready to introduce to you the guy that founded it. I'm going to let him tell you this, because now I think there's 13,000 churches have a Stephen Ministry program in their congregation.
Okay.
13,000 churches.
That's
This man was a pastor, still is, And he realized that you can't do it all by yourself. And he saw this just tremendous gifting of lay people in the church. He said, let's train and equip them to minister to one another, not to fix it, just to be there. And this was born. So I'm going to introduce to you right now, his name is Dr. Kenneth Haugk. And you are calling in from Missouri. And welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure.
You know, I want you to know how much my family has benefited from your vision that you had way back in 1975. And you've been a tremendous blessing to my family. And now we're just meeting for the first time, and yet you've had such an impact by this woman who became so endeared to my wife. Take us back to when you started this, because the impact that you've had is almost immeasurable. It's too vast. I couldn't even begin to grasp it. But it started off as something very small, and it always starts, like most things do that have greatness, it started from this, you being aware of a pressing need. So take us back to that for a moment.
Yeah, it was the mid-1970s, and I was the pastor of a congregation, and I found out that I couldn't do it all. I remember one Holy Week when we had a bunch of services, and we had a bunch of people in the hospital, and I was going back and forth from the hospital to working on sermons, hospital to working on sermons. So one reason why I decided at that time to start training lay people to do one-to-one caring is because I couldn't do it all. Another reason is that I couldn't provide the quality of care that people really needed. I was only one person, so we trained a bunch of people to provide quality care. And then the third reason is that there are lay people in congregations who do not need to be restricted to ushering, counting the money, or whatever. And I've done those things myself. They're great things. But there are people in congregations who have skills or gifts and talents for one-to-one caring. And these are the people who have come forward. And you mentioned 13,000 congregations. Yes, these are people who have come forward in those 13,000 congregations to serve as one-to-one caregivers.
You know, that to me, that's extraordinary. Now, why the name? Because I know why, but I want to hear it from you and how you arrived on it. But tell us a little bit why you named it Stephen Ministry.
Well, it comes from Acts 6-8, and Stephen was a New Testament person who was commissioned by the apostles to do acts of pastoral care. At that time, as the church was growing and the apostles were doing all sorts of things, they didn't have the time to do the caring that they really needed to do. So they appointed 7 people. Stephen was one of them, and he did great work, not only caring but witnessing to his faith, which is what Stephen ministers do today. So the name for Stephen Ministry comes from Acts 6-8, and really the first layperson or the first deacon to be very actively involved in ministry.
One of the guiding principles that you have in the training that you all provide to congregations literally around the world now is that you're not there to solve problems. Now, that's a hard thing because it's so easy for us to sometimes see things and we think, oh, you need to do this, you need to do this. You really put the brakes on that. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, back in school when I was being trained as a clinical psychologist, we talked a lot about active listening. And a Stephen minister is not just a passive listener who just sits there and doesn't respond, but an active listener is there, sometimes leans forward in his or her chair. This is a person who asks good questions, who says at various times, tell me more, or I'd like to hear more about that. A Stephen minister gets people to tell them their stories, which is extremely healing.
What do you, when you do this training for folks, and I was reading I was listening to an interview you did about some of the first training you did, and you looked at the people that showed up. These were not people that had seminary backgrounds or anything like that. What was the makeup of that? Talk about the makeup of that first group.
The first group, there was a homemaker in there. There was a business executive. There was a seminary professor, as a matter of fact, who was in that group. His wife was in there. an insurance salesman, just a variety of people in that group. And but I think the key to this is that they just weren't put into service as caring. They were trained first, and I got that idea from studying what had gone on in the church, and there was a little bit of stuff going on at that time, but also in the secular environment, the National Institute of Mental Health, and various secular areas. They were training paraprofessional caregivers. So I had the church influencing me from one side, and my profession as a psychologist influencing me from the other side, and these came together in a kind of a flashpoint to give birth to the Stephen series.
You know, one of the things we say to fellow caregivers on this show is that we drink as we pour to make sure that we're not becoming depleted. But it seems like as I was doing more and more research and delving deeper into what you are about and what Stephen Ministries is all about, is that you guys pour as you drink. And I love that about it, because you're not it. I remember one time, and I got to be careful how I say this, but I remember one time an individual was telling a friend of mine that, hey, I'm not being fed at this church. I don't feel like I'm being fed. And that kind of rankled me. It felt like they were just going there. It was like a trough for them, and it's all about them. Whereas by engaging people in this way and teaching them an active lay ministry, which I think is really at the heart of all that we do as believers, that you are teaching people it's not just about you getting fed, it's about you ministering. And as you do that, you're able to then receive even greater to be able to give out. I mean, we never deplete the inexhaustible love and ministry of Christ in our life, and you're teaching people how to just flow in that in such a profound way. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, pretty strongly. It was interesting when Stephen Ministries started 40 years ago. There were Stephen ministers who were trained, and by the way, we train trainers. That's pastors and lay leaders, how to train others to do one-to-one caregiving. So we don't really train caregivers; we train the leaders of caregivers. But in terms of getting, let's say, benefit of that themselves, in those early years, and it still happens now, a Stephen minister will come up to me and say, "Ken, I'm getting much more out of this than my care receiver is. Is that all right?" I always have to say, it is perfectly all right. But
that's a sign that you're doing it right.
Yeah. And so that they get personal growth through their training, they get personal growth through their service, and then they are supervised back in the congregation, and they get personal growth when they are in their supervision group. So there is a lot. It's interesting. It is not only that Stephen ministers are feeding care receivers, but the whole process ends up feeding the Stephen ministers. And we did not intend it in that way. We did not set out to do that, but that was just a wonderful byproduct that Stephen ministers have experienced and still are experiencing.
Our country's dynamics have changed. We're seeing healthcare needs on an extraordinary basis, aging needs and so forth. We have the reason this show exists is for the 65 million plus caregivers and growing number of people just in our country. How are you seeing that level of need impact the work that you guys are doing?
Okay, one specific is that, Stephen ministers will minister to people who are grieving, who are mildly depressed, who are homebound, who are divorced and separated, and so on. But one type of care receiver for Stephen ministers is somebody who is involved in a caregiving relationship, caring for someone, like yourself, whose spouse, is disabled. But caregivers are oftentimes care receivers to Stephen ministers, and Stephen ministers care for caregivers.
I love that, and that's exactly what drew me to you all. And I want to. I want to not only extol the work that you guys are doing, but I want to help people connect to it. So if a congregation is not taking advantage of this right now, what is the easiest way for them to do that right now? If a pastor's listening at this moment, or a church administrator or something said, you know what, we need to be doing this at our church. And you don't have to have a big church to do this. It doesn't, church size is irrelevant when it comes to this. what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, I think they can just go on the web and key in Stephen Ministries, and then that'll take them to our website, and then they can find phone numbers. They can call us, and we can send them a little packet of information about Stephen Ministry. We put it in a file folder so that when people get it, they don't have to throw it away. They can put it in their file cabinet and refer to it. So I would say just go and get on the web and key in Stephen Ministry or Stephen Ministries, and that's STEPHEN, and they should look at our website pretty easily.
Now, this is not some kind of huge financial commitment from a church or anything. This is very affordable, very doable. It's you guys have this down. What can a church expect just from the process, from the moment you call to the moment where they feel like they are competently engaging in this type of ministry? How long a time frame are we looking at?
Well, congregations, sometimes they take a couple of years to make a decision. But we've had congregations that have called us, and we've sent them information, and they have gotten involved the next week. Now that's rare. Usually it takes several months for it to go through the process. But once they get that information, it explains everything that goes on and what you need to do. We have 6 leaders training courses each year in various parts of the country. So then a congregation will select some people, usually 1 or 2 church staff, who will go and be trained as a leader in a 7-day event, and then they go back and select and recruit and train and supervise and make assignments to a bunch of lay people who will do the caring.
Well, and I only got just about a minute or two, but in the last little bit of time, on a personal note, you were the recipient of your own care that you had set in place, because you've had some tragic things in your own life with your wife and so forth. How was that when that came about in your life? What was that like for you to be able to have put so much into this, and then all of a sudden now it's coming back at you and caring for you through that process, you and your family?
Yeah, my wife was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and she lived for 3.5 years, and then she died. And during that time, I was her primary caregiver. And I remember right at the beginning, when she was diagnosed, I had a Stephen minister, and I was able to talk with a Stephen minister about that, and it sure was helpful just to get those feelings out and have somebody listen to me.
As a caregiver for 3 decades myself now, I think sometimes people think that, well, we've got it all. You created this program, so therefore you're the expert on it, and I've got a radio show, and they forget that we need this ourselves. The reason we say these things and do these things is because we're also preaching to ourselves. One of my favorite scriptures is David at Ziklag when he strengthened himself in the Lord, but we need this coming back on us. And I think that had to have been deeply moving for you to have a Stephen minister come alongside you during that time.
Yeah, very, very moving, very, very moving. And what's also really, really cool is that when a number of my friends have had situations, I find Stephen ministers for my friends here in St. Louis, and so it was very gratifying personally to me. Yes, definitely.
Well, listen, Dr. Ken Haugk, he is the founder and executive director of Stephen Ministries, StephenMinistries.org. If you think this is something your church needs to be a part of, please go out there right now and get involved. These people are ready to help you start ministering to the people in your church who are overwhelmed and your community who are overwhelmed. I've been the recipient of this in my own family. I love what they do. Dr. Haugk, thank you for joining us. I really do appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.
All right, listen, this is Hope for the Caregiver. We've got more to come. Don't go away. We are so glad that you're here. If you want to be on the show, the number is 877-655-6755. We'll be right back.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or if you signed up for a plan you're not happy with, you still have a choice. MediShare is a healthcare sharing program. Hundreds of thousands of Christians are part of this. It can save you a lot. Typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. You can join MediShare anytime. It's easy to call and look into it. There's no pressure at all. And man, what a difference it can make. 855-25-SHARE. That's 855-25-SHARE.
Have you ever struggled to trust God when lousy things happen to you? I'm Gracie Rosenberger, and in 1983, I experienced a horrific car accident leading to 80 surgeries and both legs amputated. I questioned why God allowed something so brutal to happen to me, but over time, my questions changed, and I discovered courage to trust God. That understanding, along with an appreciation for quality prosthetic limbs, led me to establish Standing with Hope. For more than a dozen years, we've been working with the government of Ghana and West Africa, equipping and training local workers to build and maintain quality prosthetic limbs for their own people. On a regular basis, we purchase and ship equipment and supplies, and with the help of inmates in a Tennessee prison, we also recycle parts from donated limbs. All of this is to point others to Christ, the source of my hope and strength. Please visit standingwithhope.com to learn more and participate in lifting others up. That's standingwithhope.com. I'm Gracie, and I am Standing with Hope.
Welcome back to the show for Caregivers, about caregivers, hosted by a caregiver. I am Peter Rosenberger, bringing you 3 decades of experience to help you stay strong and healthy, help you dancing in the streets. Who is that, by the way? I've heard so many people cover that song.
Oh, I don't know. I had it in my head earlier when I queued it up, but I just listened to it and thought, oh, that's good. And I didn't know that one before, but I'll have to take a look.
I'm not going into your head unaccompanied.
Well, you shouldn't. It's really just a bad idea.
Hey, if you want to be on the show, 877-655-6755. I sure did enjoy that with Dr. Haugk. I love their work at Stephen Ministry. I love the fact that they have this emphasis on caregivers and what it looks like to just